So Brian, let's jump right in. So first step, I want to talk about framing the ERP project, right? So when a client or a prospect asks which is better, how do you reframe the question?
Megan, it's like with just about all technology questions, it starts as a question about your organization and not about what the technology is that you need. So I'd really want to start from the perspective of what is it that you do really, and not just framing yourself in a very simple, we are a city government, or we're a port, or we provide law enforcement services, whatever that is. You need to really drill that down into much more of what understanding the different functions that you support and what you do to support them, and understanding that guides you towards the meaning of what do you really need from a technology perspective, what do you need from a business process perspective, how do your teams interact. And I can frame this too I have an example from when I worked with a nonprofit client that I think really tees this up nicely, because they're a nonprofit in which there are a small one, about 40 staff, and with that, there are only a handful of ERP systems that are really a great fit for the nonprofit accounting needs, but they also manufactured medical devices, which was a very unusual combo. And they would ship those to developing countries and also train the surgeons and provide support for surgeons on what they were doing. So you look at all that, there's no system that's been built to do exactly what they do. So it was about framing all right, what's really important to us here? So as we looked at we brought in a couple of vendors for demos, we looked at a few others on our short list, but when you frame it as a nonprofit that needs donor management services and CRM, as well as grant accounting and all those types of things, there were some systems that came into play. But then when you look at it from who's really strong in manufacturing and do what you do for medical devices, there were others. So it really came down for them to recognizing that the manufacturing was the core. So that led them to the idea of a best of breed system, because the strong manufacturing systems couldn't support a lot of the nonprofit and donor needs that they had, in which they went with a separate CRM for that. So they could have gone with another system that would have been an ERP that would have done all of it, but wouldn't have done the core components strong enough for what they did. So it really started from figuring out what was most important to them and what they
No, that's a great example of goodness. I just think about the cost savings, right? That's my first thought in all of this, right? If you're not defining what your organization needs up front, how do you know what you need to purchase? And if you're just going at it from a sales pitch perspective, right, from the vendor, and you just go out and spend millions of dollars plus recurring fees in a system that doesn't work for you, what did you really do? Right. So anyway, I'm very passionate about this. You guys see me like warming up over here. I'm so excited for this conversation. So that leads me to my next question, Brian. So how do you, as a project manager, help clients and prospects understand themselves before they go into this project? What are some of the strategies or tactics? What are you doing as a project manager to assist with that?
So there's a lot of components of that. So it happens, first of all, you have throughout levels of the organization. So you need to understand at the executive, the leadership level, what's important to them, what are the things that they see as where the organization is headed, what are the challenges they're going to face. As you know, with any project, that's the case. But you also need to be talking to the people doing the work, managing the work, and knowing where their challenges are. You see where their challenges are in integration, in particular, in handoffs. That's a big area for me with my background in process. It's always about, it's one thing to look at what's being done within an individual department and where do they have challenges, but looking across, how are they feeding work between each other? How are they communicating? What are the data challenges they have around that? That drives so much of it, because if you end up just kind of replicating that and identifying systems that are going to fit the needs as they are today, that were handoffs built in silos, built to serve individual needs, then you end up kind of reinforcing some of the same problems you have, just with faster technology. So really driving into that view of, at the different levels, but also getting people talking to each other. I usually find when I sit down with groups and get, either it's cross-functional process mapping or just sitting in discovery sessions or future stage sessions and drilling into getting people talking and learning about parts of the process that they think they don't care about, but that they really do. Where does that information come from? Why is it coming to me in the way that it's coming to me? You end up driving out a lot of knowledge that wasn't there before. And then you may come up with new solutions around what you're looking to do. And all of that is still geared towards what does the business need? And then that drives your view of what the technology should be to support.
Right. And when we go in and conduct a needs assessment, we've talked a lot about business process mapping, and process re-engineering. In your opinion, Brian, when is that necessary versus maybe not so necessary for organizations to really map out their processes?
Yeah. So there's a realistic view of it and an ideal view. From an ideal view, I'd love to see organizations that have the capacity to have this be a continual part of what they do as an organization.
Mm-hmm.
If they're big enough, if they have the staff support to do it, it's going to pay off to be able to have people who can, do that throughout, not just when you're taking on a project, but having an awareness of your processes, but also recognizing, that skill set may not be available. It may not be something that in the midst of all the other things that are going on, is possible. So I'd also say it's really critical when you embark on a major initiative, and certainly when it comes to an ERP initiative, that's a good place. There can be other initiatives where it makes sense, but focusing on it then to have a handle on what are your processes, how are they interacting. There are always things that people are learning in those sessions within the organization that's super valuable to them as well as to us when we come in as consultants to support them. So getting an understanding in the initiation of a project, but then also revisiting that throughout as you're doing implementations. As you're at different stages of that, you want to be looking at that. And one thing I often like to do, and this can sequence differently depending on the needs of it, but looking at that, once you've settled on a vendor is a really good time as well, whatever mapping you've done during an assessment and selection, to then also take a look at it. Okay, now that we know the capabilities, we need to look further at how are we going to organize our processes around that. And don't let it be something where it's driven by the vendor's configuration needs. We don't want them giving you a template of saying these are the steps you need to configure and just set that up. As first, you want to have a vision of where your process is trying to go and then drive those decisions.
Yes, absolutely. So is an organization ever really ready for ERP overhaul? Define readiness in your terms, and how do we know, right? How do we know if we're ready? I feel like the answer is no one's ever really quote unquote ready. But ready goes along with what your vision is, right? And your overall strategy for the next 3 to 5 years for your own organization. But Brian, I want your thoughts.
Yeah. It's funny when you asked that, the first thing that came to mind, I don't have kids, but from everyone I know who has kids, no one's ever ready to be a parent, but you try to be ready enough, right? So I think of it in the same way is there are definitely organizations that are not ready. I've gone to a lot where they have differing views among leadership of what they're trying to do. They don't have the availability of staff and the commitment to push something forward. They don't have an awareness of where they're at from a process standpoint. There are a lot of things that can lead to lack of readiness. And I often get into projects where those are the organizations that are driving ahead the fast and saying, we want this done in X number of months and just get it done. And then you find, okay, we can do that for you, but you have to play your part. And they're often just not in a place to pull the people together to happen. So what I look at, though, to assess whether they're ready is kind of the opposite of the things I just said. You have a leadership team who understands the need, who is ready to push it forward, is ready to allocate the resources, and then has a champion behind it who has influence in the organization to make it happen. Do you have, if not readily available, at least the ability to pull together a team of people cross-functionally? And that's really important, not just the IT team, but across the business areas to be able to support a project, to be able to drive out what are their needs, how do they need to, what are the things that are going to be needed to support within each department and function to make it work. So those people are going to need to spend a lot of time. That's going to continue to ramp up as you move forward.